So why is retention the most important metric? And it's pretty obvious, but you can only monetize an install on the days they play. If they don't play your game, you can't make money off them.
Yeah, but you can't buy your dinner with retention.
No, and you can't. Yeah,
So,
I make that point very clear. You can't buy dinner with 5-star reviews either.
Yeah.
It's 4 a.m. and we're rolling the dice. Mate drops knowledge made of golden eyes. Felix with ads making those coins rise. Jack up designs, worlds chasing the sky. We're the 2.5 gamers, the midnight crew. Talking UA adverts and game design too. Mate, Felix, Shaka bringing the insight. We're rocking those vibes till the early daylight. Mate, UA, master eyes on the prize. Tracking data through the cyberspace skies. Felix stacks dollars like a wizard in disguise. Jacob's crafted realms lift us to the highs. 2.5 gamers talking smack. Slow hockey stick, got your back. Ads are beautiful, they light the way. Click it fast, don't delay.
Felix, are you gonna take us?
Do the intro. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another fantastic episode of the 2.5 Gamers podcast, where you can stay 2.5 steps ahead of the mobile gaming industry. Today, we have a very special episode because we are joined by someone who will take us where we've never been before and dive deep into analytics. But before introducing our guest, I'm Felix Broberg.
My name is Matija Lančarić.
And I'm Jakub Remjar.
And
We
are
your
host.
hosts.
So we have the privilege today to be joined by Russell Owens. Is that how I say it right? Or am I butchering that?
No, Ovans.
Perfect.
That's right.
Owens. And we used to work together a brief amount of time at Eastside Games. And one of the things that you were extremely good at was analytics. But why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, guys. Big fan of the show since I was a little kid. Used to gather around the wireless and listen to you talk about ad placements. So today's talk, I asked Felix, like, if I came on, what do you want me to talk about? Should I do a deep dive into something specific that you guys are interested in? And he said, no, let's keep it broad. So this is everything you always wanted to know about analytics, but 2.5 gamers were afraid to ask. And yes. So to start with, I'm going to do a quick.
Oh, hello there. I didn't see you. Thank you very much for coming to this episode. It's brought to you by our sponsors, PVX Partners, the simplest and most effective credit line for marketing. If you're scaling your business and need funding, here's the deal. With PVX Partners, you can grow your game easily in your business. There's no equity dilution. You can repay as you get paid, and it's flexible, fast, and fully tailored to your growth. So you can secure funding in 30 days and get a term sheet in just 24 hours. Don't you wait. Take control of your UA budget without giving away a piece of your company. Visit pvxpartners.com and see how they can help you grow your game faster and stronger. Don't wait. Go to pvxpartners.com. And while you have you here, we also want to thank our sponsors, Vibe.co, because this episode is brought to you by them as well. They can help you grow your brand on CTV ads. With Vibe, you can launch high-impact campaigns across top streaming platforms like Hulu, Roku, Tubi, and whatever else. I mean, all from one simple dashboard. We don't have all of these in Europe. Anyway, so it's built for brand all sizes. It's rated on 4.8 out of 5 on G2 for a reason. Join over 5,000 marketing teams already scaling with streaming TV. Visit Vibe.co to get started. That's Vibe.co. Join them. And thank you very much for joining us for this special episode. Now let's get back to it. Thank you.
Kind of, take on my journey into games and what I've been involved with and why I think I might know what I'm talking about. The story begins in 2007 when a company that I had called Backstage Technologies put an app out on Facebook. This was the very first days of when the Facebook API was available. And I wanted to do an app where you could buy virtual scratch lottery tickets. And send them to your friends and play them. And my team, who were all into games, they gamified it. So it became a collecting thing where you had prize sets to collect, and some of the prizes were you could only win with scratch tickets. So we launched this thing at the end of 2007, and by the beginning of 2008, we'd accidentally invented free-to-play social games because we were the first studio to implement microtransactions with spare change. We were the first studio to implement an offer wall with super rewards, which is Jason Bailey's former company, which is why I got involved with him later on, Felix.
Oh, okay.
And then in 2010, I sold Backstage to Real Networks, to Gamehouse, and left the industry.
Pulls you back in, though, right?
Yeah.
I came back in because it turns out it's, as much as I like to pretend it wasn't my passion, it was something that I was good at. And so in 2018, I came back to the industry to work for Jason Bailey, who is now the CEO of Eastside Games. And that's where I met Felix. So Felix he managed our ad monetization for the entire studio for over a year, I believe. So I thought, he was really good. And perhaps he was the reason we were at network, I think, before that, doing
Tetris.
Yeah. So I was at Eastside Games and led analytics for 5 years, and then I retired and I published a book called Game Analytics, Retention and Monetization in Free-to-Play Mobile Games. That was my gift back to the industry. It was basically everything I'd learned over the previous 5 years, because one of the things about analytics is it's really hard to find out information about how to do it for mobile gaming. And so I put down 300 pages of what I thought was stuff that you needed to know if you were going to work.
300 pages? That's a lot. That's a good
So,
gift.
yes, it is a lot. So what I did in 2025, earlier this year, I launched a website, ARPDAU.com. And the whole point of Professor ARPDAU, as it's called, is that you don't need to read my book. And so instead, you just go to the website and everything you need to, all the tools are there for free. Yeah. So before I begin, so the way that I've structured this presentation is just as a bunch of set of questions that I think, people are afraid to ask, but why not? So the first one is, what is analytics, and is it the same or different than data science? And does anybody really care? Do you three care? I'm not sure.
Not really.
Yeah, not really. Data scientists get paid more is the short answer.
That's a great answer.
That's a good answer.
I'm not a data scientist, never pretended to be, but I get asked this question periodically, and the best answer I've come up with, I believe, is this: that if you're a game analyst and you're working in a game studio, you got tons of data about your players, and what you want to do is be able to make predictions about what your new players are going to do, and you work with cohorts, and we're going to talk a lot about cohorts today, and because it's really the foundational piece that you work with as a game data analyst. My focus is on analytics. The book is called Game Analytics. It's not called Game Data Science. If you're a data scientist, what you do is you use typically machine learning trained on historical player data to what you want to do is try and model and predict individual player behavior, ultimately with the goal of tailoring gameplay, offers, whatever it might be, predict churn on the individual user level. Okay, so in either case, you're doing predictions, right? I mean, analytics, though, uses statistics and in particular regression as its main predictive tool. Okay? Clear? Does it make sense?
Yeah. Good explanation.
So if we're working with cohorts, what is a cohort? But simply, it's just a set of players. So we're dealing with player behavior in the aggregate, right? We want to take a set of players that say they've come from the same source, right? So this is really important when you're doing user acquisition. So in particular, attributing users to a particular ad campaign. And you can go as deep as you want to this particular creative, right? So what we tended to work at Eastside Games just on the ad campaign level. So this ad network running, targeting these particular users. So cohorts are just a set of players. They have something in common. The most common thing is that you look at the players who all installed the game on the same date or had their first open on the same date. Other ways we tend to break them down is by platform and by country, example. So here's a definition of a particular cohort. We want to look at all the organic Slovakian Android users who installed our game in June. Or maybe we look at the...
And then there is also one attribute missing, installed on an emulator because he's a cheater.
Yeah, Jakub only plays on emulator.
Yeah, so we know we filter them out because they're the one making all of the $99 purchases one right after the other, right? So we can tell who's cracked the APK. So why are cohorts important? I've alluded to it. It's because it's how we can monitor how well a paid user acquisition campaign is going. And you really want to keep track of your new cohorts. Right? Cohort behavior evolves over time. And you want to understand where your good users are, what cohorts they belong to. A typical mistake some big games have made in the past is that they'll launch and they'll have this massive success in their first month, and they keep buying users based on that particular behavior of the golden cohort, but their new cohorts are not behaving the same way. Right? So you can light a pile of cash on fire if you're not careful. So we're clear on what a cohort is. Whoop, I'm going to go back one.
Yeah, we see the golden cohort behavior too often, I guess, still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's intoxicating, right? Because it's like, yeah, this game's amazing.
It looks super good, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so in the spirit of you guys' podcast, I made some 4 a.m. doodles at a hotel bar. I was trying to explain what cohorts, what their behavior looks like over time, right? So the thing about cohorts, when you're looking at how they behave, you're looking at typically charts where the x-axis is an integer and it's the days since install, right? So the origin on the x-axis is day 0. It's when the cohort starts playing. The cohort people don't have to have the same install date, like when I was talking before about all the Slovakian players in June. Because what we do is we just shift and look at their behavior from their days since they started playing the game. You know, what do they do on the first day? What if they come back? What do they do on day 1, etc., day 2, 3, 7? So some of these graphs that I've looked at is a way of looking at, say, DAO, top left, as a cohort metric, as opposed to, say, just a time series when you're looking at how's your game's daily active users doing. DAO as a cohort metric leads directly into how we calculate retention, which is the primary topic of this presentation. So the things we want to know or assume, these are assumptions we're going to make in a lot of the predictions that we make. Cohorts, is that cohorts kind of behave in this way, particularly once they get to be a certain size, right? Then, small cohorts, you're basically looking at individuals. They dominate what happens. Larger cohorts, 100,000, 10,000 users, they tend to get this smooth behavior of how they play the game or leave the game churn, how their LTV grows asymptotically, and this is the surprising one that I get a lot of people are surprised, is that ARPDAU remains pretty constant for cohorts, regardless of how old they are. Right? So on day 1, you might have an ARPDAU of 50 cents. Day 360, you're still going to have an ARPDAU of 50 cents for a cohort. And that's because the daily conversion rate tends to stay the same for the cohort. So even as users drop off, the ones that remain, they continue to spend money in purchases in relatively same.
What's the ideal minimum size of a cohort?
I like round numbers like everyone does, so I tend to say 100. Like if you've got less than 100, so when we're looking at, say, cohorts based on a geo by country, we'll typically filter out ones where we don't have at least 100 installs.
Yeah. And then what's the minimum cohort size on a daily basis, let's say, when you're having a soft launch game and you want to measure retention?
I would typically not look at it on a daily basis, but look at, like, say, group them. Because again, it's cohort metric. They don't all have to come on the same day, right? So I would wait until we've gathered enough. And you can do the power calculation on your statistics and all that, but intuitively, we know fewer users, the less reliable the estimates are.
Just want to mention for people who don't do statistics daily, power calculation means the statistical significance, which means how many users we actually need for the result to be statistically significant.
So yeah, like what would that number be in terms of the, let's say, day one retention, if I want to see?
Retention or any proportion is handled slightly differently. Though
Okay.
in this case, because the numbers are big, retention, that you don't need that many. 100 would be fine. But if you're looking at conversion, when you only have like 3 or 4 out of your 100 that are making a purchase, that's when it gets tricky, and that's where the power calculation is going to reveal that you need like 1,000 users because the events of interest happen so infrequently.
Yeah, one note regarding the great charts over there. The red curve, which is growing, the LTV1, 99% of games in the market don't see this. They see a curve that grows for 5 days and then gets flat forever. And that's how the market works. Just want to mention that.
If you see a
if you
curve
see
like
this, you see a gold mine.
Yeah, you mortgage your house. You mortgage your house and you spend it on UA.
Come on, that's like
Exactly.
day 18. That's day 18 there
It's
on the
day
bottom
18.
of that. That's
Okay.
That's not. Yeah. No, but and Felix knows this from our time at Eastside Games is that our narrative idle games, which had really strong live ops, had curves like this all the way out to 90, 180 days. Right? So, because the retention was good. That's what's really driving this, and that's again the kind of the theme of today's talk.
Still the highest rewarded IMPDAU I've ever seen in any game.
Okay, good to know. So what are we going to learn today? So I'm going to do a little introduction to my website and Professor ARPDAU's free analytics tools that are going to help you model your game's retention. And once you have a model of your retention, you're going to be able to predict things like your player lifetime value, predictive LTV, and your expected days to break even for ad campaigns.
You have that click calculation thing there on the website?
Which, yeah.
The one where you input, oh yeah, I really need to do this because every time I talk to people and I just tell them like, guys, have you modeled your CPI? Like how much money you need to throw at this? Like, oh, I think it will work out. Oh, it won't work out.
Well, I mean, no, I haven't modeled how, if you're looking for a model of how your CPI changes with spend.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining this episode. Our sponsor, Fast Spring, has delivered D2C at scale for over 20 years. They power top mobile publishers around the world and are reliably fast-growing, profitable, and very financially secure. So FastSpring isn't just figuring out D2C on the heels of the recent VC investment. Their developer-first platform and deep gaming and payment expertise have helped democratize global commerce for over 2 decades. As no drama D2C partner with real-world experience at scale, FastSpring is a partner that you can trust with your players. To quickly launch a new web store, replace an existing D2C vendor, or just add redundant D2C vendor at fastspring.gg. Thank you very much, guys, for sponsoring this episode. Now let's get back to the content. Bye-bye.
That one's tricky, and I don't
not
do
even that one, just the basic one, the linear one.
Okay.
Even that one won't work.
Well, no, you can check it out, and we're not going to get there today, but because it's kind of the more advanced one of the free tools. But yeah, what I really want to get across today is why your game's retention curve is fundamentally important. What it means to your game's success, and how it really should be your focus. And when you are building a game, managing a game, you're the product owner, whatever, really focus on retention because monetization can follow.
Yep.
So
that's definitely true.
Which goes back to, so the question then, I mean, if you were expecting me to come in and talk about all the game studio metrics and what the key performance indicators are, that's not what I'm going to talk about today because I think, your audience, if they're listening to you guys, they're well beyond that. So really what I want to talk about is what are the most important metrics and how you should be modeling them. Okay, so I'm going to start with a quote from Jason Bailey, who sat beside me for 5 years, and he used to always say the games teams, because they would look at like top line revenue and they would look at their daily active users and they would come to the growth team and complain that their DAU was falling. And Jason would tell them to go away and say, you need to worry about 2 things and 2 things only. What's your retention and what's your average revenue per daily active user, and everything else will follow. Why is that? Well, obviously, it's under their control. Right? So if you're managing a game as a product, what can you change? Well, you can change the things that are going to bring your users back. You can change how your live ops is working. That will improve your retention. And then how you monetize the users you have, that's under your control, right? Once you have those two things trending in the right direction or at a baseline level, then the growth team can go ahead and profitably acquire users for you, right? And that's profitable acquisition of users for any free-to-play game is only possible if the lifetime value is greater than the cost per install. That's the basic hypothesis of free-to-play.
LTV CPI formula.
So it turns out, though, that lifetime value is just the sum of your retention times ARPDAU. So, well, there you go. Right there in one formula explains why the games team should only worry about retention and ARPDAU, because ultimately that's what's driving LTV. And if LTV is high enough, we can grow this game relative to your cost per install.
Yeah, that's the thing I wanted to add here, that in current market, the CPI thing is kind of a little bit more important than the rest of the equation, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, everybody's fixated on CPI, right? And you got to look, LTV is just as important. It's like, but people focus on CPI because it's something they think they can game, right? Oh, we just need the right creative. We just need to lie to our users about what the game's like, and then they'll come into the game, all the techniques there. Yeah, definitely. And it becomes, I don't want to get into why, our industry is troubled by the skyrocketing costs per install. What I just want to talk about is you can build a game that you can grow if your LTV is greater than whatever your cost per install is, and however you want to go about fixing CPI. You guys can talk about that with someone else who knows anything about that, because I don't. But what I do know about is that your LTV is your sum of your retention times. I want to point that out, and you guys are going to get tired of hearing me say sum of retention, in the same way that my wife is tired of hearing me say ARPDAU.
It's okay. It's okay.
I got back at her by incorporating ARPDAU industries. Okay, so quickly, what's ARPDAU? It's just revenue divided by DAU, right? So here's a chart, a simple one that, an analyst at the game studio might put together. It's a time series where calendar date is along the x-axis, and then we can plot, like, how are we doing? What's our revenue? What's our DAU? It follows naturally, right? So these are good at revealing what your long-term trends are, but again, the CEO of DSI Games used to say that your DAU and revenue are vanity metrics. You go and focus on what you can control, and the growth team will do the rest. So, and they're vanity, but they're important. They have a business around them. So we talked about ARPDAU. Now, how do we define retention? It's one of those metrics that people new to the industry might have a little bit of difficulty wrapping their head around. It's just this: is that we have a cohort of users. How many of them come back to play the next day? What proportion of them? And that's your D1 retention. How many of them come back to play on the 7th day? We don't care about the 6th or the 8th. Did they play exactly on the 7th day? That's your D7 retention, and so on.
And what do you say are good retention metrics for D1, D7, and D30?
In mobile,
40 and 20. If you can hit that, you're doing fine. So Eastside Games just put out a fall game, and D1 retention is like 53%. That's awesome, because D1 retention will anchor. D7 is going to define the shape of what happens after that. That's what we're going to see.
Do you have also a benchmark for D90?
Well, you'll see what's in the next slide. I'll talk about what ultimately these numbers, how they should relate to each other. So D90 should be half of your D30, which should be half of your D7. So
okay.
Spoiler alert. So let's go and just jump ahead and look at the next slide here. So here's graphs you've probably seen. This is not a time series. Well, it kind of is, right? The x-axis, though, is the install date of the players. So we're looking at each day we get a bunch of players and what's their D1 retention. And you have to wait till tomorrow to figure that out. And then what's their D7 retention? Well, we have to wait 7 days, 8 days actually, before you can calculate it. And then here's D30, the poor purple one, way back there a month ago. We have no idea. We call these cohorts are not fully baked. But it doesn't mean we have to wait. We don't have to wait 30 days. We predict what, for each of these days or install cohorts, we can easily predict what the D30 retention is going to be. And let me show you how. But first we have to think about, why do we just measure retention on D1, D7, D14, whatever, studios pick their favorite days. But the numbers, this standardization around D1, D7, and D30 retention and so on, I think really comes from Eric Seufert's book, Freemium Economics, because he talks about this recurring pattern that he's seen with free-to-play games, which is that your D7 retention is typically half of your D1 retention.
Which is a wishful thinking. I mean,
yeah, it's an idealized game.
Yeah.
You're right. It is wishful thinking. But again, if you've got a compelling end game, lots of content, a live ops is pushing out events every weekend, right? These things are important. If you're just throwing out a hyper casual game with some ads that you bombard the user with in the first session,
love it.
Yeah, you're not going to see this retention curve, right? And you're in a very different business then. I'm not sure what it is, but this is the business that Eastside Games has been in, and my own studio before that. Long tail retention is crucial, and live ops is crucial. Right? So this is what Eric said. He pointed this out. And he said, "Isn't that interesting?" But what he failed to do is to actually generalize the concept. And what he was describing is just a power function. He just needed to do a little bit of math, and that realized that retention follows this formula, where you have two coefficients, A and B is the exponent and A is the coefficient. A is typically the value of D1 retention, and B is negative. And so, which means you're just dividing by the number of days typically. So I'll show you in a minute what these formulas derive in terms of its shape. Because what really we don't need to just measure retention for a set of industry standard dates. We can instead derive a retention curve, and we can measure them for any day we like. And once we have a curve, which we can usually build from like the first 7 days of data, we can predict what our retention is going to be out to day 360 or whatever, right? With varying degrees of accuracy. So just quickly, I said, it's a way of defining what a retention profile is for a game as a whole. If you're looking at your D1, D7 retention as every day, and you're looking at it bounce up and down, you can get distracted by really what you want to know is what's my game's D7 retention. And you can build a weighted average of these retention values through cohorts, like just taking them and smashing them all together. And then you can derive a retention curve, which is just a formula, a function. And it's a compact way that you can represent a game's retention, right? So, and if you have a formula, so the example here I give, say your retention by day n is defined by the formula 0.4 n times n to the negative 0.5, right? And that's actually a very typical kind of retention curve that you'll see in games. You can use that to predict what your retention is for any day. Right. So what's day 53 retention? Well, if we plug 53 in for n, we will see that it's 5.5%. Right? I picked that as because 53 is a funny number, and no one would ever think, "Oh, what's your day 53 retention?" So what's a retention curve look like? So all it is we're just going to use statistical regression to fit a curve to our observed retention values. And this graph, I'm connecting a value for D0 retention, which is always 1, as you play on the day you install, because the install is the first element. Day 1 retention of 0.4, day 3 retention of 0.23, 23%, and a day 7 retention, I think I put in 18 or something, 16. You end up then with a formula that fits this data. And in this case, it's retention by day n is equal to 0.396 times n to the power of negative 0.472. And so as you move those dots around, the shape of this curve will change. It never goes to zero. It asymptotically goes on forever, which is, of course, not realistic, but you can easily fix that by just forcing it to be zero beyond some day when you know your game never has players. But again, going back to, the Pump the Tires of Eastside Games, and Trailer Park Boys came out in 17, the year before I joined. It still has players from the original Golden Cohort, right? So they're on to whatever, thousands, and they're still retaining users.
Love idle games.
Actually, day 3,000 plus.
Yeah, exactly. So again, to take it back to those like scribbles I did on the back of the napkin at 4 a.m. in the hotel bar, the retention curve is just cohort DAU normalized, right? Normalized in the sense that, we know how many installs were part of the cohort. If we just take every day's DAU and divide by that number, you'll get a proportion. And you basically calculated retention and your retention curve.
Basically, how many users are left in the game?
How many are left? The thing about retention is it's got a funny statistical meaning, which is like if you look at, say your day 90 retention is 5%. So what that means is that if you have a cohort and you pick a user out of that cohort at random, there's a 5% chance that they're going to play on day 90 or did play if you're looking at historical data. So it's the probability that a user will play on this day after they install. Right. So if your day 7 retention is 20%, there's a 1 in 5 chance that a new install is going to play on day 7. Given that, we can do some pretty cool things with it. So, well, first of all, let's take a break and one of you or all of you go over to arpdau.com/retention, and you can play with a tool that I built so that you can come up with a model for your game's retention curve. And all you need to do is plug in some observations for what your early retention signals are. And then, my website will fit a curve to that data and show it to you. So for people looking at the slides, you go to the retention curve creator, you plug in some observations that you have from any cohort you like. So say we have 40.2 D1 retention and 16.7 day 7 retention. I'm going to leave the D3 and D30 at 0, meaning we're going to exclude those. You need to just provide 2. And obviously, of course, the more data points, the more accurate the model is going to be. You hit submit. I tell you what your retention curve is. I give you the formula for it. And I give you a little picture of what it looks like.
Nice freebie.
Tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Really, this is not hard. Like how I'm doing this is explained in detail in my book. Rather than, like I said, you don't have to go read my book. Just go play with this tool. It's simple statistical regression. So yeah, I mean, this looks pretty sweet, eh? Day 365 retention of 2.81%. We'll take that. Yeah, how realistic is that?
Sure.
The thing that's alluded to this is, Professor ARPDAU talking on the corner of one of the slides back there, is that retention and ARPDAU are often in tension with each other. Right? Like, what's a great way to make a user is to show them an interstitial ad every 3 seconds once they install the game, right? Great for monetization. So your ARPDAU would be high, but your retention's gonna take a hit. The gold mine is building a game with a day 365 retention of 2.81%, but still has monetization. Nothing to laugh at, like $1 ARPDAU or something. Yeah, $1 ARPDAU and D365 retention of 3%, you'd be okay. Why is retention the most important metric? Felix, do you agree retention is the most important metric, or do you believe ad monetization, ad revenue is the most important?
I have a call at 9 a.m. about exactly this with a client, but I do agree that retention is exactly the most important. With this particular client, we've actually managed to double the ads, and the day one retention is exactly the same. But
amazing.
Very slow base, right? Yeah, but still.
Yeah. Well, that's good. All right. So why is retention the most important metric? And it's pretty obvious, but you can only monetize an install on the days they play. Right? If they don't play your game, you can't make money off them. And so
yeah, but you can't buy your dinner with retention though. So
no, and you can't. Yeah, so, I make that point very clear. You can't buy dinner with 5-star reviews either.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah. You need to. But what you need to be able to do is, and here's the analogy I use. So I have this recurring cafe in my book to kind of ground these ideas in bricks and mortar businesses. So imagine you own a cafe and you have a customer cross the threshold. Well, you're going to monetize them. They're in your store. They're coming in to buy a coffee, croissant, whatever. What you really are trying to sell them though is a return visit, because you're going to monetize them today, but you want to monetize them tomorrow as well. So it's that whole tension between, provide them good service, provide them a compelling reason to want to come back, and make money off them today as well. So, but within mobile gaming or free-to-play gaming, what we want to know is how many days is an install going to play? Like how many chances am I going to get to monetize them before they churn? And it turns out that the expected number of unique calendar days that one of your new users is going to play your game is simply the sum of your game's retention curve. Blew my mind when I realized this. After playing with analytics data and leading analytics at Eastside Games for years, this really obvious. It's obvious in hindsight, but when you are working in the industry without any mentors or guidance or whatever, this might be something that takes you a long time to discover, or you may never discover it. So I put it in my book. I'm like, here, this is something that's pretty cool. You fit a curve to your observed retention. That's your retention curve. Then if you take the sum of that, that's the number of unique calendar days an install is going to play your game. Why is that important? Well, as we just said, you can monetize them when they play. So expected player days is what I call that. The acronym is PD for player day. It's the sum of the retention curve. So as part of the output on the Professor ARPDAU site that I include with the retention curve is not only just predictions for what your day end retention is going to be, but how many days will a player be expected to play, unique calendar days that they'll play the game by that time frame. So you can see here for this slide that by day 180, given this particular retention curve, we expect that users will have played the game 13 different days. You have 13 cracks at monetizing them. It's very much an average, in the sense of the average is the fulcrum of which you balance histogram. So if you were to look at if you were to look at a histogram of how people play your game, you're going to see that most installs play only one day and churn, right? They install, they kick the tires, they go, this game's not for me, and they're gone. And then out at the other end, you've got a bunch of players who love your game and they play every day. And you've got this massive valley in between. Right? So players either play once and quit, or they play all the time.
Why is it important to know the expected player days?
What do we derive from it?
Yeah, how can you use it?
You're going to derive LTV from it. Because so going back to this example here, by day 180, we know that the player will have played 13 times. So we know what our ARPDAU is. You multiply the two, and that's your LTV 180.
Okay.
There's nothing magic about that. It's just the algebra. devote an entire chapter of my book to showing the equivalence between monetization curves and the way that we typically look at data regarding revenue.
Sorry, I'm trying to
go ahead.
Wrap my head around it a little bit, because usually when I don't balance economies and stuff like that, I balance it mostly on like session time, session length, which gives me daily playtime on calendar day, and from that point on I know like how much actual battles the guy does or whatever. Therefore I can estimate like by this point in, I don't know, 200 days he had rolled gacha this many times, which means this has this percentage of collection, yada yada yada. But what's the translation of this number regarding that? So this has nothing to do with actual playtime, does it?
No, it just has to do with they fired up the game. And yeah, it's a bit of it's a blunt object, but it's one that user acquisition managers would use as opposed to economy game design. Like you're looking at the data through a kind of a different lens in terms of how engaged is this player, how and engagement will impact ARPDAU for everyone. But you can't engage them unless they open the app, right? They have to come back and and play it. But really, what you're starting to look at there, Jakob, is I think to my point at the beginning, looking at individual user behavior is very different than looking at cohort behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you're using a microscope, and I'm using like a magnifying glass.
Okay.
It's, kind of the difference. So let's go to the next.
To average it out by whole cohort, that's the point.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
That's the part I was missing.
And LTV is a cohort metric. It's the average, right? So
which I can do because I'm modeling it for every single user.
Right. So this player days thing so here's the running sum of retention plotted as a curve, and it looks like LTV curve. It has the same shape as the LTV curve because the players that play are the ones that you monetize. ARPDAU is relatively constant. Felix, for an ad-driven game, your ad ARPDAU is pretty constant, right? It doesn't really change. Like if it's the 180th day they're playing your game, they're still going to generate roughly the same amount of ARPDAU as they did on the first day they played.
Yeah, so the only difference is how close it is to Christmas, right? Or Black Friday.
That's right. That's right. So the professor on the right there is chiming in to say, just sort of reiterating what I said on the last slide. Since you can only monetize a user on the day they play, a player days by N is how we predict LTV. It's also how we predict DAU and revenue. So all of the predictive tools that are freely available on ARPDAU.com use the monetization curve as the Swiss Army knife of doing your predictions as to where you're going to get. But I actually give you the formula for the the player days curve, which again, these are all stated in an easy way for you to just plug them into Excel and you can play with them yourself if that's what you want. So yeah, we can predict LTV with the retention curve. Like it's kind of surprising, but if you look at it, it's just a way of defining what LTVN is. Lifetime value is the average total revenue derived by a user during their first 10 days after they install your game. Well, algebraically, it's just the number of days they play times ARPDAU. So it falls out of this notion that PDN is the expected number of distinct calendar days they're going to play the game. And ARPDAU is just how much money an active player generates each day that they play the game. So if you want to improve your LTV, which is necessary to grow because you want an LTV to be greater than cost per install, you need to either increase retention or you need to increase ARPDAU. And you need to do one without affecting the other. Ideally, you improve both. But
easier said than done. Yeah.
Or you don't.
Or you don't.
Yeah.
So the second free tool on the Professor ARPDAU website is this LTV predictor. And so you can go and play with that while I'm talking about it here. And it works very similar to the retention curve creator. All you do now, though, is you also add in your ARPDAU, right? So if you have an estimate of your retention curve and you have an estimate of what your ARPDAU is, and LTV is just the two multiplied together. And so I give you like the LTV curve, so you can get estimates of where you're going to be. What's your LTV 90 going to be? In this case, $4.68 and so on. And so you can see that if you increase your ARPDAU, you're going to increase revenue. If you increase retention, depending on how you increase retention curves are weird though, right? Like if your D1 retention was 80%, but your D7 was only 16, what would that mean? That means people are dropping off like crazy, right? And then, you would expect that trend would continue and you'd have no users by day 90. Right?
Yeah, but then you need to show millions of interstices on day one, and then you're fine.
You do.
Machi just broke the game economy. Love it.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the right. If you've got 80% D1, yes, and 16% day 7,
maximize that day.
Exactly. Yeah, and we've only got them for a week.
Carpe diem. Carpe diem.
Is there a CPI input somewhere? Because on the side I see D7 ROAS target to break even by day.
Well, here's the cool thing. D7 ROAS targets don't have anything to do with CPI or LTV. Like they're based on your ratio of what your LTV 7 is to your cost per install, and that can be like a $5 LTV 7 and a $50 cost per install, or it can be 5 cents on a 50 cent CPI. It's about the ratio of those two, and the monetization to that point is going to follow the shape of the retention curve. So the two are divorced. So here, let's go to the next slide to see what you're talking about here. On that LTV prediction tool, I include what your LTV by day N is predicted to be based on your current retention and ARPDAU. And then another column at the end is what your D7 ROAS target should be if you want to break even by day N. So, for example, N for 90. So day 90, we know by then each of our installs has played an average of 9 calendar days. Their LTV N by day 90, LTV 90 is $4.68. 28.03% is the D7 ROAS target. So if we have an ad campaign that by day 7, we're seeing a ROAS of 28% or greater, we know it's likely to break even by day 90. And it doesn't matter what the CPI is.
But the curve needs to go up. That's the assumption.
Yeah, the curve's going to follow the same shape. The retention curve and the monetization. If your ARPDAU is relatively constant, your LTV curve is going to follow the trajectory of the retention curve, the sum of the retention curve.
And ROAS here, not to be confused for our avid listeners, is not the ROAS hotel in Bodrum, Turkey, but return on ad spend.
Exactly.
I assume your listeners are very intelligent and they know what a lot of these things are. And my apologies if I'm assuming things are understood. Thank you for pointing.
It's just a prominent game CEO in our industry who, after selling his gaming company, he named a hotel ROAS. He bought a hotel. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah. That's an actual hotel.
I was hoping ROAS meant something in Turkish. Maybe it does. One of your listeners can let us know. So let's see what's on the next slide here. Oh yeah. So this is one of the things that I was interested in. So I've included it as a sidebar on that LTV tool. It's basically what happens if you miss your D7 ROAS targets. What's its impact on your days to break even? Because a lot of times you're starting a ROAS campaign and your rep from the ad network is like saying, "Oh yeah, you're close," because you're saying, "Well, we need a D7 ROAS of 28% to break even by, or 28% to break even by day 90." Well, our ROAS is only 20% on the campaigns, and they're like, "Oh, that's close enough." Well, is it? Our days to break even just went from 90 to 178. If your day 7 ROAS is only 15% in this particular example, suddenly you got to wait 316 days. And if it's 10%, you're never going to see it. Right?
Sounds more realistic.
And, you get a lot of pressure from account reps to just let the campaign run. It's learning. It's still learning, right? And and you need to spend this amount of money to get enough signals for it to learn. And meanwhile, and then even then, after like 2 weeks of spending, you're close, but you're not at your ROAS target. So you just need to be aware that shit gets real here. Like you're not going to see a return on that ad spend for, it doesn't change linearly. It goes up exponentially. So if you miss, you're going to have to wait a long time. And even then, if you're lucky, right? Like again, if your retention curve does have a terminal day, so people just never play your game after say 300 days, and you're looking at a 316-day payback window, you're probably never going to see the money back, right? At least not all of it. So don't let your account reps bully you, and to give it just one more week.
Yeah. But we should end on a positive note for sure.
Mm. So actually, we got through it.
Nice.
We're at the point it's the end of the lecture. And homework for all of you, which is to go to ARPDAU.com and play with the tools there, and do some experimenting with looking at what's better for your game. Is it a 10% lift in your D7 retention, or is it a 10% lift in your, because I see a lot of product managers really kind of fixate on squeezing more and more money out of their users, battle passes, more ad placements, because they want to increase that ARPDAU. And yeah, that's important, but would you be better off finding a way to increase your retention by a similar lift?
Battle passes actually can decrease your ARP.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree. And, or pay to remove ads. If you do that wrong, you're going to hurt yourself. Oh, no, you may increase your retention. So, it may not be a negative. So
Nice.
That's your homework. I expect
Awesome.
You guys to get back to me to that with an answer. And here, last slide is, so if that's whet your interest at all in analytics for the games industry, where can I go to learn more? Obviously, you can go to ARPDAU.com. Come for the free analytics tools. Stay for my geographical pricing tool, which maybe I'll come back one day and we can talk about that. Probably not so much in you guys' wheelhouse. You can buy my book. My book's great. It's the Bible.
There you go.
I have a copy downstairs. Yeah.
Did I buy it for you, Felix?
No, I bought it for myself.
Thank you very much. I owe you a beer.
Nice.
Yeah. So, which is about how much money I make on each copy. Jeff Bezos gets most of the revenue on this baby. You can buy my book. How to find it? Just Google Ovans Game Analytics, or you can visit the book's website, which is gameanalytics.ca. I'm Canadian, not .com, which is the good analytics company. Or you can follow me on LinkedIn, where I post about stuff like this as things occur to me and I learn more and more. I'd like to share my learnings with the community at large.
Yeah. Thanks. We'll put all the links in the show notes. And if you have any questions or comments, just put them under the video. Join our Slack channel, or just ping Russell on LinkedIn or on the email.
DM me directly.
Yeah.
I got nothing
Easy.
better to do at this point.
Yeah, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you very much for sharing all the info and the graphs and everything. And both of those tools, I will definitely play around.
Yeah, I like some new metrics today.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, if you guys can't find any value in what I've done, then I need to just shut it down and go quietly into the sunset.
Into that good night.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I'm hoping that, and hey, if you guys have any feedback about, what would be nice is if you did this or that. But I think you want to probably look at that days to break even calculator, because I think that's
that's very interesting.
It's very interesting.
I've seen a lot of LTV calculators, but I don't think so I've seen the one with this edition.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Very cool.
There you go.
Thank you for listening, and see you next time.
See you next time. Cheers.
Ciao.